Hi, and welcome to my professional development activity called Memoir Writing and the Life Jar Building Student Engagement with Memoir Writing. This is an actual lesson that I do with my students that lasts for several class periods. And the purpose of this professional development is to introduce you to an engaging way to introduce memoir writing to students, but also to get in some public speaking competencies for them as well. So, what is the purpose of memoir writing? I would start with this question both in a professional development and for the lesson, and we would share out from this point as a crowd, as a class, the elements of memoir writing. So, just a share out session. What are the elements of memoir writing? This would be when the class, or in this case, colleagues in a professional development, would share out some of the elements of memoir writing. For example, that it's a personal narrative, that it would use personal pronouns, that it would use reflection uh, writing elements as well as narrative writing elements, and so forth. And so we would come up with a working definition of memoir writing and then maybe a list of its elements. And this would be sort of an unstructured definition, but the purpose of it would be to get everyone to share out their ideas. And so working collaboratively, you would have a good idea of what memoir writing is. And what inspired this project for me, true story, I was walking around the bookstore there at Longwood University one evening, and I saw the book What We Keep by Shapiro and Wax, and there's a picture of it right here. And I picked up the book and started flipping through, and it's basically a book of miniature memoirs. And each page has a picture of an object as well as a picture of the person who owns it and their own description of the object and what it means. And it's the one object that they have kept with them forever, no matter what. And objects in this book included really small things like a marble or a matchbox car or, a business card. And then some of the objects, of course, were much, much bigger. But it started me thinking about the things that I myself keep, the little knickknacks, the little mementos that mean a lot to me. And I thought about how many of those things I have and how none of those things really has a place. They're tucked on a shelf, they're stuffed into a junk drawer, they're, in a bag in a closet or in a box under the bed. And I thought, how cool would it be if you could kind of take all of those random things that we keep and put them together, curate them into our own little collection. And so that's where the Life Jar project came from. I realized many of the things I kept were very small, and I thought, how cool would it be if we put all of these things together into a jar? And then I thought about student writing. I always have my students write a narrative paper. And I thought, how cool would it be if we could incorporate the Life Jar project and the paper together to create kind of this cohesive multimodal project where you had an essay, but then you had an actual physical representation of it. And so this is a just a snippet from the top of the assignment sheet that I give to my students. And I tell them about the project and how I want it to be meaningful. And we get together and they kind of brainstorm the kinds of things that they keep at home. If you look at the description there, I always tell the students consider the things you keep, the objects that don't have a specific place, but that are meaningful enough to keep laying around or tucked inside a drawer. What makes the things we keep so special? They tell who we are, and they are physical embodiments of us, our likes, hobbies, joys, fears, and triumphs. Look around at the things you keep and add them to your life jar. And so the students do this. And then I introduce the assignment to them. And so what kind of objects could be included in a life jar? This is just a collection of ideas. These are things that my students over the years have included in the project. You can see all kinds of things listed here that students could keep. All of us keep coins, for example. I don't know a student yet who doesn't have a cool rock or arrowhead at home. We keep jewelry, little toys, ticket stubs from concerts, things like that. And so all of these objects that kind of accumulate over time, but again, they don't have a specific place. So the life jar gives them a joint home, I guess you could say. Here are some pictures of this past year of my students presenting their life jar project. So in the upper corner up here is my student Molly, and she has some pictures that she's showing here. The objects here belong to my student Caleb, and you can see that these are all of his objects kind of spilled out onto the table. All kinds of cool things, beads and figurines and ticket stubs. You see some small toys blended in. Here is a picture of Tamira, and this is a baseball. She played baseball instead of softball when she was younger, and this was her first home run ball, and so she's showcasing that here. Here, Victoria, among her objects, has a bag from the Taylor Swift concert. It's the first concert she'd ever gone to, and so she had kept that. Here, my student Emma has a picture of a little glass bird. Apparently, that's like a tradition with her and her grandmother, is that whenever her grandmother is in a store, a gift shop, and they have little glass animals, she adds to the menagerie for Emma. And so this is one of those. Here, my student Birch has a collection of items out on the table. I'm not exactly sure what this one is because the picture was a little blurry, but this is him presenting. And the reason I included this picture is to show his body language. And you can see the smiles on the students' faces as they present. Here, you can really see his body language, though, because for the oral competency part of this project, the students do sit up on a stool in front of the class, storyteller style, and they tell their life stories based on the items that are in their life jars. And then here is Sydney here holding up a ribbon, and she has, I think, a stuffed animal here and some other objects from her jar. And then here's just a lineup of some of the jars in general. And they're really beautiful. I encourage the students to decorate their jars. So you see one here has been painted with some chalk paint. Some students will add special tops to their jars, or they'll use fabric to cover them. Whatever they want to do, they can put laptop stickers on their jars. Basically, it's whatever they want to do. But look how beautiful these are with all these different colors and shapes and objects. And some are larger than others, and some are taller, and some are rounder. And you just see these beautiful collections of meaningful things that the students have kept over time. And then here's some pictures from my own jar, of things in my own jar. And so a couple of the things I didn't actually take out of my jar because they're in there, and I didn't want them to get wrinkled when I took them out. So I just copied and pasted the actual like pictures in here. Here I have a picture of my cousin who is a professional wrestler, and this is one of his cards, one of his trading cards. And I'm really proud of him because ever since he was little, he wanted to wrestle, and he used to put on shows in his backyard on his trampoline and things, and it was great. And now he's actually living his dream, and it's so surreal to like open a pack of trading cards and there he is, or to walk down the toy aisle at Target and there's his action figure, and that's pretty cool. So this is one of his cards that I keep in my jar. The necklace here is one that my husband bought me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show Expedition Unknown or Destination Truth, but Josh Gates is a world renowned explorer. I'm a huge fan of his. He's a great storyteller. And so he wears this necklace this exact necklace, or well, this is a replica of it, but he's worn the same necklace his whole life, and he has the dial set to his home place. And so when we went to see him speak in person, my husband bought this necklace for me, and I have it set to the place where I grew up. And so no matter what time of day it is, this is a sundial. I can hold this up, get its shadow, and it'll be the time of day where I was born, which is pretty cool. This is a really tiny bar of soap that a student gave me. One of my Brit Lit students gave me. If you're familiar with Macbeth, then of course you get the joke here. It's really small though. It fits in the palm of my hand. It makes the jar smell really good too when you open the lid. But I love mementos from my students. And so my jar has several little gifts or notes that my students have given me over the years. And so next I have a picture here. The actual picture itself is in the jar. I didn't want to take it out to wrinkle it. Of course, I have multiple copies of this. Not sure if you guys recognize this fellow, but this is Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. Mark Paul Gosselaar, I don't know that he has a bigger fan on this earth than me, and I've loved him since I was, 1989 when Saved by the Bell came out. And last summer I was able to meet him in person, and that was like a lifelong dream. And so it was just the coolest moment ever. And so he was so nice and so kind, and he autographed everything I asked him to. And he actually talked to me for several minutes and just made chit chat. And it was fabulous because he was so nice and down to earth. They say you should never meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed, but I luckily was not. This is a ceramic cross that a friend's mom made for me. And I love this friend's original artwork. The mother, she makes beautiful artwork. And she made this for me. I'm very religious. I love Jesus. And so she made this cross for me. And it's just absolutely beautiful. The textures of it and the color, that blue color, the picture doesn't even do it justice. This is a picture of my kids playing out in the snow. Again, this picture and the one beside it of me and my husband, those are in the jar where they won't get ring. I've got them kind of where they are around the side of the jar so you can see them like you're looking at a picture frame. And I didn't want to take those out, so these are just ones that I actually copied and pasted from my Facebook. But these are my kids, Ian and Charlotte, playing out in the snow. This was taken about 4 to 5 years ago. And then this is a picture of my husband and myself. This is on the one night when we went to see Tony Bennett in concert at DPAC. I'm a huge fan of Tony Bennett. I've seen him, I think it was 4 times. My husband tells me we've seen him 5, but I can only count 4. But this is the first time that we went to see him. These are just a few of the objects in my jar. My jar is pretty full, and I keep it on my desk at work, and I love it. It makes me happy to have all those things there that I can see. I do take this necklace out, though, a lot and wear it. So what I would do in a professional development or when I introduce this to my students is I would form groups of 3 to 4 participants and have them just on a scratch sheet of paper keep a grocery list outline. I love grocery list outlines for brainstorming because they get the ideas out on paper, but not in a stressful way. It's just quick and it's effective, I think. So I would have students or in a professional development atmosphere, have the participants sit together and talk about the things that they keep. And they would jot those out in a grocery list outline. Grocery list outlines are also a great way to lead from one idea to the next. If you're just simply sitting and tossing out ideas or objects, you're going to miss something. But when you start actually writing them down, it jogs your memory, I think. So they would share with their partners the things that they keep in their jars and why they've kept those things over the years. And then each participant would choose the one object that maybe means the most, the one object that's the most unique, the one object that is rare, whatever the case, the one object from the jar that would really stand out. And they would explain why they would write about that one object in a kind of like a miniature narrative or a mini memoir. And then beside that object's name on the list, to take the grocery list outline and the brainstorming and pre-writing one step further, they would choose some specific adjectives that they could use to describe in the paper. And so let's go back. An example here. I will use, for example, the cross. If I chose to write about the cross for my paper, I could talk about its color being blue, and then one step further, it's cobalt blue. I could talk about the thumbprint sized indentation here in the middle, the smoothness, even though it's textured, the smoothness of the glaze here. I could talk about the kind of olive green coloring around the edges here. I could talk about the weight of the cross in my hand. So that would be what I would do. If I had a grocery list outline that listed all the things on the screen and I chose to write about my cross here, then I would list out all of the things I could think about that, all the adjectives I could think of. And then your group members could help you come up with some ideas as well. That's the whole point of having a share out session. You also find out you have lots of hobbies and things in common with other people when you share your grocery list, because I'm sure other people collect arrowheads, for example, or old coins. I'm sure other people have heirloom jewelry that they have, accumulated over the years and things like that. So for the oral presentation for the life jar, after the students have, or have collected all of their objects, and I usually give them a week to do this. They will bring their jars in and they will sit at the front of the class, storyteller style, as you saw here, and they will tell their life stories through their objects. They don't have to go in chronological order. They don't actually have to talk about every object in their jar, but they talk about themselves and their experiences and their hobbies and their passions. And it's a really cool thing to do at the beginning of a school year when the students don't know each other that well, because it gives them the opportunity to get to know each other. And so for the oral presentation, again, they share the objects from their jars, talk about how they obtained them, talk about why the objects are meaningful, and so forth. And then the paper itself will accompany the jar. The students will choose the one object in their life jar that holds especially strong or important memories or significance. And what they do is they write a 2-page memoir explaining what the object is, how they obtained it, why it's so important to them, and what it symbolizes for them specifically. And so the jar, the oral presentation, and the paper kind of collectively go together as a grade. And so you could use a rubric to grade the paper, or you could use a rubric to grade the oral presentation if you chose to. But what's cool is that you have this sort of multimodal presentation, and that you have the physical objects and the pictures. And sometimes students will put in, they'll do a video of themselves playing guitar, and they put like an MP clip or whatever into the jar. There's all kinds of things that could work here. And then they actually write the paper and the essay. And so if I were to do this at a professional development or when I do this in class, I always have a lot of jars on hand to give to students. And you can get them cheaply. You can buy the canning jars like at Walmart or farmer supply stores. You can also just tell students, hey, in the next couple of weeks, if your mom fixes spaghetti, hold on to the jar. And they, so they have to, they can choose the jar, a jar that they have at home. But I always have plenty on hand. And if I did this as a professional development, I would surely have a jar to give to each participant to take with them, along with a list of ideas of the things that they could fill it with. And so it would be time to get started and add the things that you keep. So the questions that I would have for you for this presentation, and I have done this probably for 5 years now. What are some ideas to take it to the next level? What are some things that I could do to make this even more of a meaningful assignment for my students? Would you have them write about the whole jar? Would you keep it to one object or maybe two? How would you introduce this to students? Normally, what I do is I model it, which modeling I know is good, but it can also be bad. But I often model it by bringing my own jar in and telling them my story, so they kind of see what I'm going for with the project. But those are the questions that I have, and this is my professional development activity. I look forward to your feedback.